Hello and welcome to the National Leadership Briefing. My name is Doug Sharpe and I will be your host for today. Well, we have a big hour ahead of us, so let's just get started here with the agenda. First of all, on the agenda today, and it is going to be a jam-packed one, you can count on that. On the agenda today, we have an answer period segment, we call it. Now, there's a question that many of you have been asking out there about what is the best way for me to communicate my views to my elected officials. So if you have a member of parliament or a member of the legislative assembly in your province, or even a counselor with your local community government, maybe a municipal government or school board trustee, what's the best way to communicate your views to them? So many of you had that question. So we're going to answer that question for you today on the very first answer period segment. Next, we're going to be taking a look at a challenge that I'm going to be presenting you with in the form of an assignment. You and I know that whenever we get an assignment and we complete an assignment successfully, we get the benefit of that good feeling inside of us. Well, I'm going to give you that opportunity to have that good feeling by presenting you with a challenge and an assignment that you can complete before the next briefing. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to continue our conversation about preparing for the future. And sometimes obviously we always love it when the opportunities present themselves on the horizon, but sometimes there are threats. And we need to be prepared to greet those threats when they occur. These threats, though, aren't always foreseeable. Sometimes they're surprises. They come to us in the form of a crisis. And we want to make sure that we're doing all we can to deal with the unforeseen threats, the things that pop out of nowhere at us and kind of surprise us a bit. So we're going to continue that conversation today, and I'm going to bring somebody onto the briefing here today who has made a career out of dealing and helping people that are in crisis. So that's going to be a very interesting segment today, and a special surprise about who I'm bringing on too. I'll share with you later on. Then we're going to take a look at an opportunity to offset all this conversation we're going to have about threats and crisis. I'm going to present you with a really, really great opportunity that you can take advantage of that will put you in the room with your member of parliament on a regular basis. It'll be a way that you can connect with your member of parliament on a regular basis and have really good, solid chats with them about what it is that you believe and the things that you want to see done on the road ahead and ways that you can build your relationship. So stick around for that opportunity conversation. And then we're going to close today with we're going to explore the source of truth when it comes to things like the war in Israel. I've got a special guest who's just come back from Israel, going to share some insights on what he experienced there, but also we're going to be sharing with you a source of truth that you can rely on, that you can trust about what is happening there ongoingly. So stick around for that right to the very end of the briefing today. I'm looking forward to sharing that guest with you and actually just doing everything we can to prepare for the road ahead, continuing to serve you, continuing to serve our church families, and continuing to serve our fellow citizens here in one of the greatest countries in the world. So thanks so much for your time today. I look forward to serving you on the road ahead, but let's take a quick break and come right back with the first answer period segment. Okay, let's get started with today's answer period segment. The question that has been asked by many of you is, what is the most effective way or the best way for me to communicate my views to my member of parliament? Now, of course, we have to remember who your member of parliament is. He is your elected representative. He or she is in the House of Commons in Ottawa. They go there because they're there to represent your views. So it is a natural thing, first of all, that you have meetings regularly with your member of parliament. Now, that might seem a little bit strange to you, but people do communicate their views all the time to their members of parliament, and we need to be those people because, of course, remember, we are here working to advance the views and values that are represented in the four pillars. Views and values aligned with parental authority, our view on right of belief, freedom of religion, our view on prioritizing the vulnerable and the protection of the vulnerable in our communities. And of course, we want to see that burden of debt lifted from the backs of our children and future generations. So meeting with our members of parliament is a natural thing to do. Elected representative government. That's what we have. Now, what is the best way to do it? Well, the best way remains to this day requesting a meeting either by phone or email and setting up the meeting for a specific time, showing up on time, sitting down and having a nice conversation with your member of parliament about the things that you consider to be important. Now, we hope that what you're going to do is you're going to share some of the views that are represented again in the 4 pillars. We're hoping that you drill and train on a regular basis, or at least have them written down on a piece of paper and communicate that you would really like to see the authority of parents to raise their children the way they want. You believe that that should be affirmed in law or protected, or at least you'd like to see it represented in the actions that our elected representatives take. So this is how the 4 pillars work into all of this, is that we have these beliefs, we drill and train to make sure that we're rock solid in our ability to communicate what they are. And then when we do have that opportunity, doing it in person is most definitely the best way. Now, some of you may say, you know, that's not me. I just can't do that. I'm feeling uncomfortable already just thinking about sitting down in front of my member of parliament. Well, that's okay. It's a natural reaction sometimes for some people. They're a little bit uncomfortable in meetings like that face to face, and they maybe have a misunderstanding about the power dynamic, thinking that we work for them when in fact they work for us. All of these things come into play. But if you are uncomfortable about setting up that meeting yourself, just find one person in your sphere of influence. It could be a family member, maybe a wife or a husband, or it could be another member of your family. Maybe you might want to model this kind of action to your children. Maybe you've got an older child, like a teenager or something. You want to see mom or dad go in and actually just have a good meeting with an elected representative. Whoever it is, just maybe going in with one other person is going to bring that to a level of comfort where you can actually do it. So feel it out, feel yourself out. Of course, pray about it, and feel free to take people with you. Now, it's always good to have a plan when you're taking in other people that you both agree on, because you don't want 2 different people going off in 2 different directions. But that's the finer point to put on it. The bottom line is, in answer to your question, what is the best way to communicate my views to my member of parliament? The answer is in a face-to-face scheduled meeting that you prepare for and you execute in person. That is the best way. So I hope that helps. That is our answer period segment for today. We're going to take this quick break, come right back, and we're going to move on to the very next thing on our agenda, which is the challenge that I'm going to provide you in the way of an assignment. It's an opportunity for you to feel good inside because you've gotten something done. All right, we'll be right back after this video. Thanks so much for your time. These are the things that we believe in. First, that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want. Second, that those we elect to serve us in civil government must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion. Number 3, that the laws and policies of civil government must provide for the safety and security of the citizens, especially the vulnerable among us. And number 4, that it is inappropriate to heap debt upon the backs of our children and future generations. They came from you. They're your pillars. They're the things that you believe. That is good enough for us. That should be good enough for our elected representatives. Okay, it's time to stretch. It's time to get out beyond ourselves and challenge ourselves, so as to speak. So I'm going to give you a challenge here today. I know I'm doing it for the right reasons, because I just want you to feel good. So here it is. Here's the challenge for today. As you know, if you're on the National Leadership Briefing and you've been here before, you know that it is our goal, a primary goal, to grow the briefing. It is a primary goal to grow the briefing for a very specific reason, and that is that we know that here in Canada, we are a democracy. And the more people that speak up about the things that we believe in and speak together, the louder our voice is. So we've got really pure, a real pure reason. It's not an ulterior motive. We're just trying to grow the number of people that come together and talk about these issues so that we can speak louder when it comes time for us to speak to these things that we believe in. We rally around these things together for a reason, and we come together for a reason, and we want to grow it for a reason. Well, the challenge that I want to give you today in the way of an assignment is that before the next briefing, I'm going to challenge you to go out and find one other person that shares your views and values. Just one. Go find one other person that shares your views and values with respect to these 4 pillars. So that means going up, maybe you might be a parent, a mother or a father, and you might want to go out and find another mom or a dad that really, really believes that parents should have the right to raise their children the way they want, that doesn't want government interfering, that doesn't want somebody else telling what they should teach their kids in school. But you want to find one other person that feels the same way you do about your authority to raise your own kids. And I want you to then invite them to the next national leadership briefing. But wait, there's more. I also want you to send me an email when you say, okay, I've invited somebody, and so I can go right on, well done. So that's the challenge before the next briefing. The next briefing isn't until April. So the next briefing, you got a whole month, and actually it's a long month. March is a long month, and there's going to be a few days before the first Friday in April. So you got an extra long period of time to go out there and find that one other person that shares your views and values and make the invitation for them to join you at the next national leadership briefing. Have them register on nlbcanada.com, and where they can register for the briefing so they get the link themselves, and then send me an email to say, hey, Doug, I completed the assignment and I have successfully met the challenge. And so I can celebrate with you. Okay. Thanks so much. Now here's my email address. You're going to see this in the post notes as well, but my email address to let me know that you've completed the challenge is president@familyaction.ca, president@familyaction.ca. And remember, while you're doing this challenge, the number one rule, we talk about it all the time, if you aren't having a good time, you're doing it wrong. So go out there and have some fun with it. Be a happy warrior. Let people know how much fun we have on the briefing and how excited it would be to have them join us, and say it's only 1 hour once a month. You can throw all that other information in too, but really let them know that it's not going to hurt a bit. So thanks so much for your time on that. I'm looking forward to hearing all the success stories about you reaching out and helping grow your sphere of influence locally, and also the briefing nationally by doing this one thing. All right, back in a flash. Okay, before we introduce this next segment, I want to play a video for you. This will help introduce the person who is going to be joining me for this segment. And yes, you are going to say to yourself, that is a very familiar name that this person has. And the reason being that the guest that I've got coming on is Don Sharpe, spelled the same way as my last name, because he is my brother. He is my biological brother. And so I'm going to be bringing on my brother in a moment here, but it's because my brother Don is a career paramedic. I mean, this is a fellow who has received awards. He has been out there dealing with emergency medical situations and crisis situations and all kinds of different variations on distress and surprises when it comes to the to medical emergencies. And he has an awful lot of experience and knowledge to share with us about the importance of preparing, understanding the differences perhaps of what your expectations are about what are available, what resources are available to you in an emergency versus what perhaps you might need to do in advance to prepare to meet an emergency if one comes upon you or your family or your church family. So let's watch this video, which is it shows him actually receiving an award for bravery in his community. I'm very, very proud of my brother. I'm proud to share this video with you and also introduce you to him when we come back.
Once we got in the door, we knew there was something very wrong.
This particular crew found themselves walking into essentially an assault in progress.
Somebody came out and said they had heard screaming next door, and so we decided to go in and investigate.
They didn't know what was happening, but without hesitation, they entered the premises. They saw the bloody scene and the man actively assaulting the victim. Benjamin and Donald acted swiftly, assisting the victim to a safe location while holding the man at bay until police arrived.
It's about jumping into events where you would have never said, oh, I would do that. And that's what I look at bravery. And it's phenomenal to see what people will do for other people.
We didn't have any choice. We moved forward, and we made some decisions to engage, and I think in this case we made the right decision.
This is just a great example of the unknown situations that our crews find themselves in literally every day in all over this province.
You know what, I'd like to say thank you. And truly from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you.
I think it's a great honor for this crew. It just shows that their efforts in safety of the public and going above and beyond to ensure that their patient was safe and doing what they could to ensure that the assailant was taken care of as well for the police to do their job.
We were just getting ready to leave. The police officer came out of her room and he said, she wants to talk to you. And I couldn't imagine what she'd want to say. I went in and I said, hi, I'm Dawn. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to introduce myself earlier. And she said, thank you for coming to help me. And that was pretty much the best part of the call for me. I was just grateful that we were there and were able to help her when she needed us.
Well, I don't want to delay at all my introduction of my brother, Don Sharpe, to you today. So let's bring Don on. Well, Don, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. This is such an important subject matter that we're covering here today. So many people have expectations about what's available to them in the way of emergency medical services if they need that. And I'm just so glad that we're going to have this opportunity to sort of bring people's expectations more in line with what perhaps might be the reality for them and their community. So thanks for coming today. I appreciate that.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
Let's start there with expectations. Why don't we start there? So what do you feel is, I mean, you've been out there, you've been working a career loaded, meeting and greeting people's expectations and talking to a lot of different people in different situations. What are most people's expectation about what medical emergency or emergency medical services are available to them in their communities?
Right. So most people don't expect an emergency to happen. Most people aren't prepared when an emergency happens. And having seen so many emergencies over the years, I can tell you, I see the same thing over and over. A lot of emergencies are caused by people not paying attention, by rushing. But I can also tell you that we know that when an emergency happens, people spend at least 2 minutes trying to run around and fix the problem themselves. Imagine you're sitting at the table for dinner and your mom starts to choke on a piece of food. People will run around for 2 minutes on average before they actually even call for help. So also know that it takes a few minutes for the dispatcher or for the call taker to collect that information, then transfer it to the dispatcher. It takes a minute or so to alert the crew and get them out of the station and on the way to you. And then there's travel time. So again, we see the same thing over and over. And so I'm glad to be able to be here today and discuss a little bit about what happens during an emergency and how you can help and what happens when things go wrong.
Well, that's great. So most people don't, first of all, that's pretty interesting. Most people, of course, don't expect to be in an emergency. And then
Yeah.
when they are in an emergency situation, they waste a little bit of time there, and it might be really valuable time that they're wasting. So the advantage of preparing in advance of having an emergency, boy, that makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. Now,
Yeah.
when somebody calls, for example, let's take a look at it from a community perspective. There's so many resources, so much in the way of resources available. How do you, first of all, how do you know how long it's going to take for an ambulance to arrive to your house in an emergency in whatever community you're in? Because we've got provinces all across the country that have different emergency medical systems in place, and they have different staffing issues and whatever. Is there anything consistent over all of them that you can say about the amount of time it takes to get help?
Well, absolutely. It does take some time. Of course it does. In this country with medical priority dispatch, when you call for help, you'll have somebody on the phone give you some instructions on how to help the patient before the ambulance arrives. But everything takes time. It'll take 2 minutes mostly for people to realize that there's actually an emergency and they need some help. If you can learn to recognize an emergency by taking a first aid course or a CPR course, that's 2 minutes you're going to save, that you can recognize right away that there's a problem that you're going to need some help with.
So in Alberta, you have a situation where you have emergency medical services. I recall I grew up in Alberta, and I remember believing that 20 years ago, if I picked up the phone and called an ambulance, that I would have an ambulance at my door in 7 minutes. For some
Yep.
reason, that seemed to be the number that I remember. Is if that's my expectation and I call, and yet I'm in Saskatchewan, how do I know how long it is going to take for an ambulance to arrive in my own home province?
Right. So things have changed. A lot of people think that once you dial 911, they just need the address and then they're going to be on the way and they'll arrive in a short amount of time. Things have changed a lot in 20 years, and a lot more people now call for ambulances. We question, us paramedics question sometimes the validity of some of the calls. I've gone lights and siren to calls that were nothing like what were described to me over the radio. We get asked all the time to go for minor complaints that don't really need an ambulance. And so a lot of organizations, EMS organizations, have developed protocols to screen those calls out at triage. That's a good idea. And to do that, the call taker has to ask you some questions to make sure you get the right resource. But we have way too much evidence now that because of poor policies from leadership in the, not just in the government, but in the bureaucrats that run these health departments, poor policies, like when you have a hospital-centric system that thinks it's okay to hold ambulances in an ER hallway looking after patients, not being able to serve patients in the community who are having medical emergencies, this is where you start to run into problems. And we've seen, and again, I worked with Kathy Lee from CTV on a documentary, Broken System, EMS Crisis in Alberta, that demonstrated clearly there's a lot of people who don't get served. So I think I'd like to talk about what happens when the ambulance isn't coming.
Yeah, and that's really a critical question, isn't it? Because again, if we're talking about the expectations of the citizen as to what they can expect in the way of service, and that service doesn't arrive, what can somebody do if that's a possibility for them in an emergency?
Yeah. So again, the call taker will ask you to stay on the line. And 20 years ago, we developed this medical priority system where the call taker will tell you what to do to help the patient and other things to help the crew get in right away. Turn on an outside light, open the front door, put the dog away, that kind of thing. And it really looked like we were making huge progress. But now with long EMS hallway waits, problems with even getting staff to be in these vehicles, we're looking at you can sometimes, and we have lots of stories of ambulance people waiting an hour for an ambulance. So at what point, after you've called back 2 or 3 times and asked, where's the ambulance? And they say, well, it's on the way. Well, where is it right now? and they don't tell you, that's when you have to start thinking, well, maybe I need a plan B. People do need to train. They need to practice. They need to prepare for an emergency. And we can talk about that. And, how do you prepare your family for something that goes wrong? And what do you do when the help you expect isn't coming?
Well, yeah, and let's talk about that because we serve here on the briefing, we serve a lot of churches, and those are
Mhm.
church families, and
Yep.
they're all different kinds of people living in all different sets of circumstances in communities. We serve families themselves, and it's just mom and dad want to make sure they've got emergency services available for their kids. But again, you say if my expectations aren't the reality, if there isn't an ambulance coming or there is the service isn't available, what can I do to just become more prepared for dealing with a
Sure.
situation, like you say, plan B?
Yeah, preparing is important. Planning is important. A little bit of foresight should tell you that, what, if I haven't taken a first aid course and I don't have a first aid kit, I'm probably not going to know what to do in a first aid situation. So go take a course, take a first aid course, take a CPR course. And then maybe if you want to do a little more advanced planning, think about the community. What happens if say your wife collapses down in the basement and you need help getting her upstairs because the ambulance isn't coming? Is there somebody you can call? Is there a neighbor? Is there a friend? So developing those, and again, church communities are great for this. You usually have friends and people you can call. You probably have a list of people you can call that will come over right away. Not everybody has that, but it's a really good idea.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, now you and I had talked before, and you mentioned that you actually do training that deals with the first is 7 minutes of an emergency situation. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So the first 7 minutes program was developed by Magen David Adom. That's Israel's national EMS service. It's a program that's designed to help a large group of people where a large number of people have been hurt. Somebody, let's say a wall collapse or a shooting in a synagogue, or somebody runs over a bunch of people in their parking lot. How do you deal with a large number of patients in the time between the incident is over and it's safe to help people and the first ambulance arrives? So we teach these groups of people to work together as a team, to assign a leader, to grab ready to go packs of just white stuff, bandages to put on the red stuff, right? Blood. How to
Mm.
triage patients, which patients you don't move, what to do with the patients who can move that are getting in the way, how to organize a scene and be prepared for the first in ambulance. It's it's difficult topic to discuss. It's the reality for some of those communities, the Jewish community, um, that are at risk of being under attack. So, and again, this comes right from Israel, right from their national EMS service, which, quite frankly, I think is the best EMS service in the world.
Oh, fantastic. And
Yep.
and they certainly have had years to develop it over very trying times.
Oh yeah.
So now, right now here in Canada, it is fair to prepare for the Christian church experiencing some of those same things. And of course, we serve a lot of Christian churches here, and we're starting to see a rise in hate crimes, if you want to call it that. And we want to be prepared if there is a situation, an emergency situation. Can you offer any advice for a local church pastor who might want to just make sure that they've got a heads up understanding as to what the risks are out there, what some of the threats might be on the road ahead, and how they can best prepare their leadership and their church family to deal effectively with them if they have that problem?
Sure. And I'm not a real expert in security, but I can give anybody a basic suggestion, which is get first aid trained, get CPR trained, make sure you have an AED in your church.
AED being in.
Automatic external defibrillator, a
Okay.
heart shock machine,
Oh,
works independently, automatically. They're easy to use. There's lots of different models, but it's great to have one close by if you need one. If timing is important in a major medical emergency, and if somebody's heart stops, CPR is great. Defibrillating them if they're in a shockable rhythm is even better. We've seen lots of success. Start small with a first aid course, a CPR course, raise money for an AED, learn how to use it, and then again, just have a team ready, right? And practice. I can't emphasize practice enough. When I was a paramedic, we practiced every day. We practiced for calls that we don't do very often. We practiced moving patients in difficult situations, so we were ready. That makes a difference.
Well, drilling and training here on the National Leadership Briefing is something I talk about all the time, so that won't be odd sounding to anyone who's on the briefing today.
Right on.
Practice does get you closer to perfect. It's never
That's
going to
it.
be perfect, but it gets you a little bit closer. So you and I had talked before, so I know I'm not putting you on a spot. If we have someone who is on the briefing today or is hearing this down the road who would like a little help getting started in becoming better prepared, can we offer them your contact information?
I'd be happy to help. Taught a lot of these first 7 minutes courses. I've been a paramedic for a long time. I've seen a lot of what can happen. Even, my own family, teaching them to keep their head up. Be aware in transitional spaces like between your car and the front door of the grocery store. Pay attention. Know your surroundings. It's really simple stuff. And actually, like you said, training is important, and it can also be a lot of fun.
Wonderful. Well, if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right is also another thing we say here on the briefing all the time. So I think everyone will be aligned with that. Well, thanks so much, Don. I appreciate your time today. I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation because we do know that the road could get a little bumpy there out in front of us. So we want to make sure that we're as prepared as we can be. Thanks for your time today.
You bet. My pleasure. Thanks, Doug.
Okay, so there you have it. We have some valuable information that's going to be in the post-briefing notes today. We're going to make sure that you're going to have that access point to Don Sharpe. He has offered to assist if you want to put together some training. I'll make sure his contact information is in the post-briefing notes. We also have the additional information. We're going to include the EMS crisis story that CTV did, and we're going to include a link to that so that you can see the challenges that they're having in the province of Alberta with their EMS services and response times. Also, I want to make sure you've got a copy of that video of my brother that you could share with other people as well. Pretty proud of him. He is one brave paramedic for sure. He and his partner, Ben Rempel, just did an amazing job, and so happy that we have people like that on our front lines. Our first responders in our nation are really amazing, doing a great job. They just need a system that works well around them, and we're going to do everything we can to help support them in their work. All right, well, that's great. Now let's move on from the preparing for the crisis to capitalizing on the opportunity. Now, we're going to be real quick through here because I want to save some time for my last segment today. It's a very important one. I have a very special guest, but this is an opportunity that we need to be aware of, and I'm going to make sure I put some details and some information in the post-briefing notes for you on this. We have an opportunity in our nation where there's going to be what's called a redistribution of ridings. There is going to be a moment in time coming up here next month where all of the ridings in Canada, the electoral districts that is, there's going to be some boundaries changing. There's going to be some new ridings formed. There's going to be some meetings that happen at the local level where they have to reconstitute the board of directors that are established in those ridings. And you very well might be in one of those ridings, those electoral districts, where a new board of directors for a major political party is going to be established. So I want to make sure that you know about this opportunity. If you have a heart to engage in politics, in partisan political politics, this is the partisan part of it. That means that you have a favorite party, then you might have an opportunity to join one of these electoral district association boards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to encourage you that if you have a heart for politics, you want to join an electoral district association board, you want to meet regularly with other people to advance specific candidates into the election that will be coming at the federal level. I want to make sure that you have access to my contact information so that you and I can begin working together so that we can help you get elected to one of those boards. So search yourself, get on your knees, pray to God that he bursts a vision of for where he wants you to be in your heart. And then if it is confirmed that you should be activated into the political realm, please let me help you. Because this opportunity that we have before us, we definitely want to capitalize on. Why? Because we're going to advance these views into the conversations that take place within those electoral district association boards. Okay, so that's the opportunity that's before us. Please don't hesitate. If you get a confirmation in your heart, make sure you speak up. I'm available. My email address will be in the post briefing notes. All right, great. Let's move on to the last segment of today. I'm going to introduce this gentleman to you. It's not going to be an unfamiliar name. This gentleman, I'm sure you've heard of before here in Canada for many, many, many years. He served not only at the federal political level in government, but also the provincial level in the province of Alberta. I'm talking about Stockwell Day, former member of parliament, most recently for Okanagan-Coquihalla, an electoral riding association. I had an opportunity to work with him and serve with him in as his assistant. And Stock is going to share a perspective for us on experiences that he's had recently in Israel. Now, the reason why we're bringing this information to you is because you and I know that if we're going to be going out into our own individual spheres of influence, and we're going to be talking about issues like what is happening in Israel right now and what happened on October the 7th, we want to make sure that we have the very best information possible. And in fact, what we really want to be in possession of is truth. We want to have the truth. And this is a trusted source of information that I am willing to put my name on because I've just known him for so long. So we bring this information, these people with these experiences and with this information to you because we want you to have access to the very best truth and the very best information out there, the truth. All right. So that's Stockwell Day. Let's bring one out. We've got some great news to share with you about a project that he's working on, and I know you're going to be excited to receive it. Well, thank you so much, Stock, for joining us today. Very important subject we want to cover. So excited to have you here.
Doug, thank you for your interest.
One of the greatest reasons that we wanted to connect with you, Stock, is because you're a wonderful guy, but you also have had some recent experiences that we wanted to share with the people that we serve here on the National Leadership Briefing. You've just recently come back from Israel. You have extensive experience traveling the world, and you have a really clear perspective on what's happening there. And we wanted to ask you a few questions today, if that's okay, just to let people know what your observations are and how they can learn from your experiences. What I wanted to start out with maybe is you could tell us a little bit about your trip to Israel and some of your things that you feel are important for us to know about what happened and what is currently happening there right now.
Well, Doug, thanks for your interest, and to your viewers also. The genesis of the trip began in a conversation a few weeks after October 7th. And it was meeting with Jewish groups, principally in Canada, somewhat in the US. And we noticed that already, just a few days after the horrors of October 7, there began to be, as we sort of feared, a kind of a decline in support for Israel. Even though the attacks and the atrocities, everything was so horrendous. And so it was decided that we would, I was asked if I would lead up a documentary team, go to Israel, get footage on the ground, talk to people from the north, south, east, and west who were affected, and bring the real messages of what took place. And we're titling that under the overall umbrella of October 7th Lessons Learned.
And when you were in Israel, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you experienced. What did you see? Just give us a kind of a from the front lines perspective, if you would.
Yeah, Doug, I'm going to tell you, I was not prepared for the depth of trauma and emotion that people were feeling, and that was transferred really to me, to others, anybody who's talking. For instance, when we went, the IDF was very good about getting our camera crew and sound crew to the actual conflict areas and to the areas that have been hardest hit. For instance, along the southern border of Israel, which borders what viewers would know as Gaza, there are many kibbutzes, and the media, mainstream media, was reporting that kibbutzes were attacked. These are actually small towns. They're fully gated communities. They're wonderful, beautifully built up areas. And in terms of not just the tragedy, but the treasonous part of it all, many of the people who work on the kibbutzes, Doug, are actually Palestinians from Gaza. And they travel into Israel every day. They cross the border, and they work with, they eat with they associate with the many people who are on the kibbutzes. The people, the Israelis there, the Jews, always saw these as friendships. In fact, we see now in retrospect that for weeks, if not months, the Palestinians who were working with the Jewish people on the kibbutzes were gathering very detailed information about the kibbutzes, where the leaders lived, where the children were, in which houses, where were the access points. So that doubled the actual physical and emotional horror that took place. And Doug, all I can say, I mean, I can go in as much detail as you want, but the detail of the atrocities is something that they're so horrific that even very pro-Israel news sources are somewhat reluctant to give them out. Let me just frame it for you this way quickly. When I visited with the surgeons at the Hadassah Hospital, including notably the surgeon who is head of gynecology at the Hadassah Hospital, this is a Muslim woman. And she was there when the first waves, especially of young people, of horrifically injured and tortured young people started coming into the hospital, many from the kibbutzes and some from that music festival that was going on. And she described to me in detail, which I can't hardly get into, about the nature of the injuries of the women who were coming in, with pelvises that were shattered, with their most tender parts of their bodies torn to shreds, with breasts having been amputated in front of the eyes of others. You just no idea of the degree of the horrific nature. And this was the same type of discussion I had with the IDF soldiers who toured me through the kibbutzes, and some of the people who were there who witnessed with their own eyes children being killed, children being decapitated, children being put, if you can believe this, in ovens, people being burned alive as they were hiding in their shelters. It was beyond imagination to hear it. And I could tell you, Doug, when you're doing the process of the interview, you're trying to show some empathy, but you have to remain somewhat detached. Obviously, when I got back to my hotel that night and I called my wife at home, and she just asked the question, "How was it?" And I started to talk, and I just broke down. It's like nothing it's ever happened to me before emotionally. I just sobbed convulsively. It was the first time all day I'd been able to let the impact of that happen. And this is what happened to thousands of people on October 7th, not just in the kibbutzes, but at that music festival and in other places.
Well, we've been hearing a lot of leaders around the world and sadly here in our own country and in the United States talk about the war and the response to this war as our response, or the response of Israel, as being over the top. I mean, this is obviously, there's a level of brutality that they're responding to there. What's your perspective, having been there firsthand, and you traveled with the IDF, you've talked to them all. What was your sense as to what their response was and the level or measure of response?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one of the lessons we've learned, that media is not talking about in the manner they should, because they talk about proportionality. And I can tell you the IDF response now, in terms of going after Hamas, they are far less humanly horrific and vicious than what happened with Hamas coming over the border into Israel. If anything was disproportionate, it was the attack by Hamas. And what you don't hear, Doug, very much on mainstream media, it needs to be repeated, if not daily. And people who are protesting in Canada and the United States, they're not being told Hamas has two goals. The goals are in their charter from 1988, and they state their goals publicly on television in the Middle East. Their goals are, number one, eliminate Israel as a country. Number two, kill Jews everywhere all the time. Those are the goals of Hamas. And you may have seen, we have recordings, television recordings of Hamas officials saying that they want to normalize these atrocities. There's no backing off on their part, and the atrocities are going to go on and on and on. So, you know, if you can try and bring it to a single issue, if a house full of nasty people across your street in your neighborhood came in and broke into your home, killed some of your family members, possibly raped your daughters and raped your wife, and then said, and we're coming back to do it again, you would be going after them. You wouldn't be saying, oh, let's just have a little ceasefire. They have to be eliminated. There's about 20 to 25,000 Hamas in Gaza. They hide in hospitals. They are not letting Palestinians escape. They're not letting Palestinians get into Egypt. Egypt won't even take them. And they are continuing every day. The attacks continue. So Israel has to, and it is their goal, and I understand it, they have to do as the Allies did in the Second World War. If we remember our history, we did not stop the attack on the Nazis until they were eliminated. And there were some awful things that happened. The bombing of Dresden in the Second World War, the bombing of many citizens had to happen. It wasn't till the Nazis were eliminated did it stop. And if the Allies had said, you know what, Nazis, we're just going to call a ceasefire here. We're going to forget everything you've done, and we're going to call a ceasefire, then Nazis it never would have ended. Israel, I understand their commitment. They have to eliminate Hamas. Before they attack an area, they go in, the IDF goes in, they warn people, they say, please leave. We're going to bomb this building, we're going to bomb that building. That's never happened before in warfare anywhere, where you tell people ahead of time to please clear the area. Hamas is hiding behind human shields. The IDF is avoiding that as much as possible. The numbers in terms of casualties themselves, we know are grossly exaggerated from the Palestinian side. But this is why this has to happen. When Hamas is eliminated, and I do believe they will be eliminated, there's over half of that 25,000 warriors they feel are now eliminated, and they're going in for the rest. And that's why it has to happen. They have to put a stop to it, and they have to put a stop to it once and for all, or as promised, Hamas will continue, as they've said, to do this over and over and over.
Thank you for sharing that. And as the story continues and as the war continues, we're going to continue to see the mainstream media, no doubt, get it wrong. That's why I'm so excited about your project and the releasing of these videos on your YouTube channel and on X. Tell me a little bit about the first video that you've posted, because we're going to include it in the post-briefing notes and encourage everyone to subscribe to the channel and get the rest of them as well. But just start with the first one and give us a little bit of a sneak peek as to what people might expect.
Sure. Well, and thanks for doing that, Doug. And people need to understand the documentary is in the process of being put together. It's probably going to be about 60 minutes in length. So in a way, your viewers are getting a sneak preview. We didn't want to wait until the whole documentary is done, just because there's information that's so important. So we're putting it up almost like episode by episode. So if they go on YouTube, or if they go on to X, previously known as Twitter, my handle number there is at Stockwell _day, at Stockwell _day. They scroll down, they can find it, or they can go on YouTube. So the first one we've done, we're dealing, and it's integrated into the documentary, but it's dealing with the question, is Israel apartheid? As you know, there's this ridiculous and completely unbased, in fact, libelous accusation that goes on that Israel is an apartheid state, when in fact it's the only country in the region that allows full democracy, women's rights. Muslims can vote. Muslims can serve in the Knesset, as they do. Muslims can serve on the Supreme Court, as they do. Minority rights are respected. When I see, Doug, and my heart goes out to these protesters who call themselves Queers for Palestine, and when I see that, my heart goes out to them, because if they were actually in those Palestinian areas right now, or any of the states, the nations that surround Israel, they would be killed for saying that they are queer or saying that they are gay. That doesn't happen in Israel. There's full expression of rights permitted in Israel. So that's the first, in terms of lessons learned, We're putting up the reasons why we know and can say boldly that Israel is not apartheid. And we're challenging media sources around the world not to let that accusation go unchallenged, because they just let the accusation stand, whether it's coming out of the United Nations or wherever. And so people sort of shrug and they say, well, I guess Israel's apartheid. And it's so far from the truth. So that's lesson number one, dealing with this completely ridiculous accusation about Israel being apartheid. But the lesson we've learned is mainstream media does not do anything to push back on these completely false allegations.
Well, thank you so much for making this source of information available to us, because we all don't have the ability to get to Israel and see firsthand, and we're able to learn from your experience. And thank you so much for going there. And it sounded like it's tough to experience it, but so glad that you're turning that around and giving us an opportunity to walk that walk with you and see things through your eyes. And you know what? I've known you a long time. You're a trusted source. And this is what I tell people all the time on the briefing. You've got to find a trusted source for information, especially if you're forming your own ideas and opinions about something and then teaching them to others or sharing them with others. You better make sure it's the truth. So I believe we've got the truth here, and I'm excited about sharing it.
Well, Doug, thank you for that. Thank you for the work that you do and you've done for so many years. If there's one thing I would ask your viewers, and I appreciate them watching right now, contact your MP and tell them two things must happen. Iran must be completely labeled as a terrorist state. And very importantly, the United Nations group called UNRWA is the United Nations Work Relief Agency. It must be completely defunded. UNRWA is operating in the Palestinian areas in Gaza. They are funding the huge infrastructure projects, billions of dollars that should have gone to the dear people of Gaza. They are funding textbooks which have inculcated a generation of Palestinian young children to want to kill Jews. And our response in Canada and the US, all funding to the United Nations Work Relief Agency should stop, and people should advise, call, write their elected representatives to tell them that.
We'll make sure that gets done. You and I will make sure in the post-briefing notes today that easy links are available for people to grab that information and advance it to their members of parliament. Thanks for making that known to us. We want to make sure we're doing that. Thanks so much for your time today, Stock. I appreciate it. I look forward to keeping in touch with you and the day-to-day show, which is now available, like I say, on YouTube and X.
Thank you, Doug.
So look to the post-briefing notes today. We're going to make sure that we have all of the quick links, the easy links to the day-to-day show. We're going to have a link to Stockwell Day's Twitter account. You can also keep in touch there. But also, I'm going to make sure you heard at the end where Stock had encouraged us to get in touch with our members of parliament and share our views and values. And if you think back to the beginning of the briefing today, we talked about during the answer period segment, we talked about what is the best way to express your views or share your views with your member of parliament. And we established that it was to get into an in-person meeting. So I'm going to make sure that if you go that route and you want to get in front of your member of parliament and share your views on UNRWA and Iran and your position on Israel and what you believe and view is important to you and to the things you want to express, I'm going to make sure that you've got information at your fingertips. So please check the post-briefing notes today and have a great meeting with your member of parliament. Now, just so you know, one of the things that we do often between briefings is that we will get in touch, or people will get in touch with us, and they'll say, okay, this is my plan. I'm going to get in touch with a member of parliament. I'm going to schedule a meeting. Can I get in touch with you just before the meeting? And we'll just have a quick kind of go over the plan with you. So I'm happy to do that. All you have to do is give me enough time ahead of the meeting to spend a few minutes with you, either on the phone or hopefully maybe Zoom call. Maybe we could do a Zoom call and just let me hear your plan and speak into it. I mean, I might be able to help you with a couple of suggestions on your approach and how you might have the very best meeting possible. Now, you're not always going to be sitting in front of a member of parliament that shares your views and values, but there is a very respectful tone that you can maintain, obviously, in these kinds of meetings, no matter who you're talking to. And I just have great confidence that if you go in there with the right heart, a heart that honors, first of all, that honors the individual and their position and the fact that they're doing their best and working in their office there, I just know that you're going to have a fantastic meeting. So maybe we could spend a few minutes on the phone just before you get in there on a Zoom call. All right. Hope you'll take advantage of that offer, because you know what? I'm happy to help. All right. Well, thanks so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing the briefing with people. Remember the challenge that I shared with you today. Remember that all-important challenge that you bring one person who shares your views and values, who actually agrees with the principles that undergird these 4 pillars. Bring them to the next briefing. Make sure they get registered. You'll see a link in the post-briefing notes today, but you can also go to the website nlbcanada.com and you can actually register them there and make sure that they attend. But let me know that they're coming and let me know of your success, because I want to high five you and say thank you so much for being a major part of the team. We're excited to have you here. All right, that's it for today. Until next time, until we get together for the April briefing, just know that I'm going to be praying for you. I'm going to be praying for your family, and I am going to continue always to pray for this great nation of Canada. God bless you.
It's important to understand the geography, how close the major cities of Israel are to Gaza, because right here you can see this is Jaffa. Christians will know this as the place where Peter got the vision to, you can eat all different types of food and to take the message out to the world. And just beyond Jaffa is Tel Aviv. And then right here, it's a misty day, but you can see the outline of buildings down there. Just past those buildings, that's Gaza. And rockets do come over from Gaza. They can come all the way to Tel Aviv. This is a very real crisis.